we're looking at changing the subject of the formula. Make x the subject of the formula. The formula, p equal x over a. Now, what is the subject currently? Since we're seeing p equal x divided by a, it means p is our subject. P is isolated. So therefore, we need to have x in that position. We need to have x equal. We need to have the x isolated and written on the left hand side. So how do we remove the a that is actually dividing x? By multiplication. Now there are several ways, but I want to show you the formula triangle, which is one of the ways that will help you to think without it eventually. All right, so let's look. We have the division line, and then we have the multiplication sign. That's all we need for the formula triangle. And then we're going to look at what is above the division line in the formula. What is above the division line? You're correct. X is above the division line. And so we're going to put x above this division line here. So x goes here. Now what about the other two parts? What goes here and here? That's correct. What goes there would be the other two terms in P and A. Alright, so now that you understand that, let's look now at how we determine what x is. X is, well, what we're going to do, we're going to cover over the term that we want. We want to find x. We want to have x isolated. We want to transpose for x. So when we cover over x, we see that x is equal to what? P times A. Directly between P and A is multiplication. And so x is equal to P times A, which is PA. Or if you want, you can say x is equal to AP. The order of multiplication does not matter. So either one of these is correct. Alright, so we're looking at this question that reads, make A the subject of the formula. Make A the subject of the formula. Alright, so we're looking at this question that reads, make A the subject of the formula. And the formula, B equals Y over A. So currently, B is the subject of the formula. It reads B is. What we want is to make A the subject. In other words, we want it to read A is. So how do we get this A to be the subject of the formula? Well, let's look at the formula triangle that has a division line and multiplication sign. So what goes above this division line? Well, let's look at the formula. What is above this division line? That's right, the y. So the y goes above the division line. What goes here and here? The two remaining slots. That's correct. We should have the other two terms in B and A in the two remaining slots. So we can put our B and our A in the two remaining slots. Then the term that we're looking for, what we're going to do, we're going to cover it. Now remember, we want to make A the subject. And so we're going to cover over the A. So if we cover over the A, let's write what A is equal to. So we're saying A is equal to, and we look at the other two terms in Y and B. What operation is directly between Y and B? The division line. And so we can say A is equal to, since we're covering over A, and we put the division line, since that's the operation that we're working with between both of the other two terms. And Y goes above the division line, as we can see here, and the B goes below. And so we are saying A is equal to Y over B. Now make X the subject of the formula. For the formula, P equals the square root of X over M. So we have P as the subject. We have P as a subject. But we want X to be the subject of the formula. So what do we get rid of first? That's correct if you said to remove the square root. The square root is affecting the x divided by m entirely. So this is saying find the square root of x divided by m. And so we want to remove the square root first. To remove a square root, what do we use? If you said square, you're correct. So square is the reverse of square root. And so to remove the square root, we're going to square both sides. So to remove a square root, we use a square. So what will happen here? The square cancels out the square root. And then we tidy this up by writing back the remaining terms. So we have p squared is equal to x divided by m. Remember, the square root was cancelled out with the square. Now we're back to a family place. Now we have what? We have three terms. So we can turn our attention to the formula triangle in finding x. In other words, make x the subject. What do we do? Let's turn to the formula triangle. We have the division line. We have the multiplication sign. What goes above this division line? Looking at the equation with three terms, the second term being a fraction, we definitely have x above the division line, and so we put x above the division line. The remaining slot, we put the other two terms in p squared and m. So p squared goes here and m goes here. So what we do, we cover over the term that we're looking for. So we're going to cover over, if you said the x, then you're correct. So we're going to cover over the x, that's what we're looking for. And so we're going to write x is equal to, and if you notice between p squared and m, we have the operation of multiplication. And so we will multiply p squared by m to find x. And that's the term that we cover over. So we can see what happens between these two terms that remain. And so we'll have x is equal to p squared times m. Yes, this implies that x is equal to p squared m, or we can say mp squared. So this is our solution. Next question, make x the subject of the formula. We have f is equal to the square root of t over x. So now we have f as a subject. F is being isolated. In other words, we need to change the subject from f to x based on the direction given to us. So how do we get to x? How do we isolate x? We first need to remove what's affecting everything else. The square root is squaring t divided by x. So we need to remove this square root. And to remove a square root, we use square. So we're going to square both sides. And so this will give us square both sides, f squared, and the square root of t over x also squared. And so what will happen here? Square cancels out square root. And what we have remaining is f squared is equal to, the square only cancels out the square root. So they cancel each other. So we have actually t over x, which is not affected by that operation. Now, let's draw attention to the formula triangle, division line, and multiplication sign. What should go above the division line here? What goes above the division line? We look at the formula and identify what is above the division line. We see that it's a t. So the t goes above the division line. That's all. And what goes here and here? That's correct, the other two terms in f squared and x. And for us to make x the subject as given to us, we cover over the x. So covering over x, it will read that x is equal to, and looking at the operation between the t and the f squared, we see a division line. So x, in which we covered over, is equal to t, which is in the numerator, So t is a numerator, so we keep it as a numerator, divided by f squared. And this is our solution. Let us look at the next questions. Well, make x the subject of the formula p equals square root of wx over m. So currently we have p as a subject. In other words, p is equal to wx divided by m. The first thing we want to do is to remove the square root, since square root is affecting the wx divided by m. So to remove square root, we use square. So we're going to square the square root to remove it. We square this side, but we also have to square the other side. And this allows us to cancel the square root with the square. And so what we have here is p squared is equal to what's remaining after the square root is cancelled out with the square. That's correct. wx over m. Now, how do we remove the m? We could use a formula triangle, but we could also use this method. To get rid of the denominator, we multiply by that denominator by putting it as a numerator. So it's m over 1. So we cancel out the factor of m with the factor of m here. And what that does, it allows us now to write m times p squared is mp squared. And on the right hand side, we have wx divided by 1 is still wx. wx times 1 is still wx. Now, remember, we're trying to make x the subject of the formula. So we need to isolate x by removing the w. But we need to pay attention to how w is connected to x. When we read this, what do we say? We say w times x, or wx. But w times x means that the two variables are connected by multiplication. So remove any of them by division. Which one we want to remove? We want to remove the w so that we could have the x isolated. So therefore we divide by w. But what we do to one side, we do to the other as well. And this will give us w into w goes once, and so we have x being isolated there. And then we write the numerator of mp squared divided by w. In other words, x is equal to mp squared over w. And this is our solution. Let's take a look at the next example. Now we have the subject of the formula being p, and p is equal to a over t as a fraction multiplied by x plus 4 over m, and x plus 4 over m is being square rooted. So p is equal to a over t times the square root of x plus 4 over m. Now, what we want to remove first, the square root is only affecting x plus 4 over m. It's not affecting the a over t. So that allows us to remove the a over t first, since the a over t is actually multiplying the remaining symbols that we have here. So to remove the a over t, we can multiply by its reciprocal. In other words, a over t multiplied by its reciprocal, which is t over a, will actually give us 1. I'm sure you can think about why that is the case. Okay, let's look at it. A into a goes once, and a into a goes once. T into t goes once, and t into t goes once. This dot here means that I'm multiplying both. So a over t times its reciprocal, a over t times its reciprocal. What is the reciprocal of a over t? Just flip it around. A in the numerator becomes a in the denominator. T in the denominator becomes t in the numerator. And so that's how we have the reciprocal. Any quantity multiplied by its reciprocal is actually equal to 1. So that's what we want. We want to have just a 1 in front of the square root symbol, which means we'll get back the same square root of x plus 4 over m. We're going to multiply both sides by the reciprocal of a over t, which is t over a. Remember, our goal is to remove the a over t and put 1. So we need to multiply by its reciprocal, and we multiply both sides by the reciprocal of a over t. Now pay attention to what happens here. Now if you notice that a cancels out a cancels out a, T cancels out T, T cancels out T. So T into T goes once, A into A goes once. And so this allows us to have T over A times P. And what we can actually write this by putting the P over 1 as TP or PT over A, because A times 1 is A, equals the square root of x plus 4 over m. Now, we need to get rid of the square root, correct? That's the next step. Remember, our goal is to make x a subject. So we need to get rid of the square root. How do we get rid of the square root? By squaring both sides. By squaring both sides. Squaring the square root gives us, since we have a square root, we're going to square both sides. This allows us to cancel the square with the square root. And so we have TP to be squared, which we can write as T squared P squared over A squared. So each variable gets squared, equals x plus 4 over m. Now, how do we do this? We do not have 3 terms. We have 2 terms, and both terms are fractions. So what we can do is to isolate the x by first removing the m, since m is dividing x plus 4. The 4 is only being added to x, so we cannot remove that first. So we want to remove the m first, the denominator first. So we're going to multiply both sides by m. So m cancels m, and so we have m times t squared p squared over a squared. Now, m is actually a numerator, so m times t squared p squared will give us m t squared p squared. And 1 times a squared will give us a squared, which is equal to x plus 4. What is our next step? Our next step is to remove the 4. Remember, our goal is to isolate x. So we need to subtract 4 from both sides. Because we're adding 4 to x, to remove it, we subtract 4. Subtracting 4 from this side leaves us with x. And subtracting 4 from this side, we'll have mt squared p squared over a squared minus 4. And we can leave our answer as this because we really have x as a subject here. Make h the subject of the formula. So to make h the subject of the formula, what do we need to do first? Recognize that d is a subject. So we need to remove what first, guys? Yes, you're correct. We need to remove the square root. And we remove the square root by squaring both sides. Now remember, a square root is cancelled off with a square. And so we have d squared is equal to 4h over 5. How do we do this? Well, we can use the formula triangle first of all, and then we can find h by removing the 4 after, or we can multiply both sides by the denominator. So let's do that first. So we have d squared is equal to 4h over 5. Get rid of the 5 by multiplying by 5. Because 5 is dividing 4h, so we multiply by 5, it will cancel the 5. But because we multiply one side by 5, we also have to multiply the other side by 5 in the same step. And so this will give us 5d squared is equal to 4h. So what's our next step? We have 5d squared is equal to 4h. Remember, our job is to make h the subject. So we need to isolate h. How is h connected to 4? By multiplication. So remove it by division. And so we divide 4 into itself. What we do to one side, we do to the other. And so our solution is that h is equal to 5d squared over 4. Yes, h is equal to 5d squared over 4. And this is our solution. And this is the end of this lesson.